people with this crazy demonstration down there that haven't a clue. I believe it had something to do with Alex Jones, I'm not sure.
Oh, it did? Really?
Thought so, he was doing a demonstration today, so I assumed, but it may not be.
We get the 9/11.
That was
We only get those on the 11th.
And the fact is what it was.
And, oh, yeah, they have a national, Ron Paul circle, I think it's not even Ron Paul, it's the other guy, Baldwin.
HR 2755.
Baldwin Circle, and they're gonna put it on November 22nd.
There's one of the earlier things I'll be doing is I'll be talking about Lee Harvey Oswald, the pictures of him on the operating table. And I don't own the copyrights on those yet, so I can't allow that to be videotaped.
Just tell me when to cut it.
Okay, but the other stuff, the really crucial stuff, the second headshot, that you can do,
Okay.
because I've already done that. And
I've seen the picture of Oswald, you talk about it.
We can lower the voice.
that'd be a very good idea.
What?
I'm sorry?
I've seen the picture of Oswald that you're talking about, I mean, we were chasing those down
Ralph, do
several
you
years
need
ago.
that?
No, this is something
There's
else.
something else?
Yeah,
Ralph, do you need that click lag?
I'll explain it very quickly.
For this, we're gonna have to lower the light.
There were 8
Do you need
rolls
that
of
click
film
lag?
taken of Lee when he was still alive on the operating table at
We'll
Parkland,
have to move it to
film that we didn't even know existed.
interfere with.
And I acquired all 8 rolls last year and took them to Denver, the only place that actually processes that film anymore.
They were not processed.
They were not processed
How can
after 44 years.
So what kind of quality of the image did you get?
I think the technical term is crappy,
Okay.
but they were heat damaged, they were water damaged, they were age damaged certainly, and they'd been stored in Florida heat for Lord knows how many years. And when we processed the film, it came out absolute black. You couldn't see a thing. The DMAX was horrendous. You couldn't see frame lines or anything. So we very, very sad about it. I got this idea. There's a chemical called Farmer's Reducer, which actually clears away some of the DMAX and thins it out a little bit. And so I suggested that we give that a try, and we did. And we just about make out frame lines, and we put it on a computer-controlled printer and ended up with 85 usable pictures.
Oh.
And I'm using about half of those in the book,
Okay.
the new book. So I have a small handful of them here to show you what exists. And it's definitely Lee, there's no question about it. I took him to Dr. McClelland, who's a friend of mine, and he identified almost all the doctors in the pictures. Dr. Crenshaw himself and others. And no one's ever seen them. No one even knew they existed. So what this will do, this is an entire chapter of my new book, and it's going to give people a chance to take a step back into history and see something that only a handful of people ever saw, and that nobody even knew existed.
So why would somebody, at first they went to all the trouble to make the photographs,
Mhm.
then they put them away without developing them, even though it was historic. Why? What was certain?
There were several people involved. The person who took the pictures didn't have them. They were confiscated from him. And the person who confiscated them is the one who had them. But he had no interest in the case, was afraid of all of this, and gave them to somebody else who gave them to me. And I had them developed.
What can you learn from the pictures about
Absolutely nothing. It's just a piece of
Oswald
history.
and the wound and-
No, so what you can learn is one thing that's very important. I have heard several people on the other side say that Lee died on the way to the hospital, that he was still, when he got there was no chance.
I heard it started at night, it was an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, what we've got is we've got two of the pictures actually show the heart monitor, and he had a very strong, stable heartbeat.
Oh.
Well, that's one thing we can learn from it. What's interesting about the pictures is, I mean, they are quite gruesome. I mean, Lee's lying there on the table with his chest cut open. They pull his heart out and they're massaging it, and it's amazing piece of history. It's one of those things. It's like passing an accident. You don't want to look, but you can't help it. You can't look away from it. They're interesting pictures. So since the issue that I'm dealing with here that deals specifically with the second headshot, the isolation visually of the second headshot, It doesn't take long to go through that. I wanted to give a bit more than just that. There's other stuff in the book that I don't dare reveal until it's printed, because it'll get stolen real quickly. So the reason why I wanted to do this up in Pittsburgh is that Cyril Wecht has been one of the strongest proponents of the second headshot for all these years. And I felt that, you know, especially with all the hell that he's gone through in the last couple of years, he deserved some good press, some good feeling, something to verify what he said. And so I wanted to release it at his conference, thinking, of course, that the book would be out by then, and it's not. The fellow who was going to finance the printing of the book couldn't afford to do it. There was a problem that came up.
What are you going to call your book?
It's called JFK, Absolute Proof. And whereas The Killing of a President and The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald each had a little more than 600 photographs each, this one has 800. Hey, Steve. How you doing, buddy? And so that brings the total of the pictures in the 3 books in the trilogy to 2,000, just a little over 2,000. And this is probably going to be the last book I'm ever going to do.
I can't wait to get it.
A lot of people have waited for it, and you know, one of the chapters in the book deals with the president's brain, where it is, and photographs of it. Another one deals with Oswald, absolute proof that Oswald worked for the Central Intelligence Agency.
Right.
Well, stuff we've always suspected before, but this is the actual proof.
I had someone we know come to me and tell me that Dr. Smith had examined JFK's brain in the National Archives, and it was definitely a shot from the front.
Really? That I didn't know.
I heard that this year.
Well, do you believe it? Is it
I
someone
don't
you
know
know?
whether to believe that or not, unless I saw some, photographs along with it or some evidence of it.
Well, I'm also, there's, you guys are probably aware that I found a photograph in the archives, an autopsy photograph that's not in the official, what's the word I'm looking for? Official inventory. It's a black and white photograph on 120 film, and I reproduced that. There's a lot of good stuff in the book. And I'm just aware that Gary Mack's going to attack it the very first day. It's his job. So. Has anyone considered the parallel between Gary Mack and Darth Vader? Used to be Anakin Skywalker, not anymore.
I don't know who Gary Mack is.
Gary Mack is a fellow who got interested in the Kennedy case when he saw me on Goodnight America, the Geraldo Rivera show. And he was a very, very outspoken person on our side for a long time, until the Sixth Floor Museum offered him $70,000 a year. And then all of a sudden you can't get him to admit that there was a conspiracy. And he's appeared on all of these garbage Discovery Channel shows, and now backing the other side. I have no idea how much money he's making now, but it's got to be a lot more than that. But I figure that even if he never got a raise in all these years, they've paid him well over $750,000 to sell out. Yeah.
He was the one that came up, he was instrumental on the badge man and stuff.
Now try to get him to admit it. Yeah. Do you know Badge Man?
Oh, that's the guy.
The guy behind the
with
stockade
Dallas
fence.
Police let him find.
Right. He seems to be dressed as a policeman.
Well, now the badge man, down the Discovery Channel deal, the story is, here they've taken photographs of a man standing back there with these cameras, and you just don't see anything like that in the Mormon photograph.
Right, because they're faking everything. They're changing the position, the height, and everything else, and the size. They've done that every time. What they've done this time, I guess you all saw the inside the target car. The thing. First of all, the president at the time that he's killed is slightly tilted to the left, but he's facing straight ahead. They've got the head turned this way by about 30 or 40 degrees to the left. Then this idiot who fires from the knoll, instead of hitting where the bullet really went in, he shoots up here in the front by the forehead. So naturally, since they've changed the angle and the location of the wound, they have the bullet coming out of the side of the head. They said we would have had a dead Mrs. Kennedy, is the quote. Of course, they forget to tell you that in frame 313, the moment of the headshot, Mrs. Kennedy is sitting about 7 to 8 inches farther forward of the president and not sitting next to him at all. When they were shooting the scene out in Dealey Plaza, I showed them the actual photographs and showed them they were doing everything exactly wrong. And they said, oh, it's not important. These are not important issues. These are just minor points. It's the whole thing. And Gary Mack is standing there, and all he can say is, you got the X in the wrong spot, Robert. Yeah. Which I don't, but he said I did. That's all he cared about. Now, why they would go to somebody who's done absolutely nothing in the case instead of somebody who really knows it is just beyond me, if they cared at all. Of course they don't. But when you think about Gary Mack, what has he done? You know, he's done two things. He carried Mary Farrell's message about the possibility of the sounds being on the acoustics tape to the HSCA. It wasn't even his idea. He just brought it up there for her. And the other thing was the discovery, as you said, of Badge Man. And Badge Man was actually discovered by President Carter's sister, Ruth Stapleton. Excuse me. Hello?
Robert,
Yeah?
hey, this is Bobby.
Yep. It's my birthday. I'm getting calls all day long.
That's
Happy
right.
birthday.
It
Thank
is
you.
your birthday.
Did
That's-
John and Martin call too, or just Bobby?
Just Bobby. Abraham called.
Abraham.
Yeah.
I remember Larry Howard came up with a roll of, what was it, 8mm
8mm film.
It was totally black.
Yeah.
And sent it to you. He showed it, he had it, he was putting it in an envelope, showed it to me as it went in the envelope. It went to you. Was there anything that you could do further on that?
Nowadays there just might be, but probably not. The actual story behind that was it was supposed to be, and actually this is very good, we're getting a chance to do something so you guys don't get too bored waiting for everybody else to show up, if they ever show up, if they're going to show up.
They will.
That was the roll of film that was found in the possession of, allegedly, of Roscoe White. It was supposed to be the roll of film that he said he got from the soldier on the grassy knoll, which would have been Gordon Arnold. The thing is that what Gordon said is that he took the film out of the camera there in the plaza, which exposed it to daylight, so there wouldn't be any image left at all. It would have been totally light struck. If the story's true, if it's even the same roll of film, the whole thing, the whole story. Thing is that Gordon said that he took footage of the motorcade, which means that that type of a camera, and this is another thing which goes back to Gary Mack, something that was never resolved is the type of film that it was. Was it in a cartridge? Was it a reel-to-reel? There were a few cameras, not many, very, very rare, but there were some, that used regular 8mm cartridges, similar perhaps to Super 8 cartridges, which didn't even exist yet. They were still experimental. So I wanted to ask Gordon, you know, what type of film it was. Was it a cartridge that he had in the camera, or was it a roll of film? Well, Gary, who knew how to get in touch with him, refused to let me know how. Wouldn't give me the phone number, wouldn't let anybody get to him. He wanted him to be his witness. So Gordon died, and we never found out. It's never been resolved, and now probably never will be, all because of Gary Mack.
My recollection was that Gordon did not want his picture taken by anybody over there, and Larry Howard went over there and kind of took some pictures around that showed him at an angle or something, and then gave that to me.
Ah.
So I have that somewhere.
Well, Gordon, as I recall, did not remember exactly where he was standing. And because they were, Nigel Turner was trying to make a specific point about the badge man, he had Gordon stand arbitrarily in one spot and sort of vaguely point over his shoulder toward where the badge man was. I believe that I found Gordon Arnold in the plaza in one photograph. He's standing heavily in shadow. I assume that nobody has my book here, the killing of a president?
Not here.
Okay. If you've got it, check the large picture from Jim Towner that shows the grassy knoll. It shows 3 people on the knoll, one of them walking up the stairs. I think it's Buddy Walters. And then somebody else is halfway there, and then a fellow in a work suit, a work outfit, is standing on the little pedestal beside the pergola. And he's looking into the parking lot. If you look just to the left of the tree, the big tree that's there, deeply in shadow, there's a shape there blocking the view through to the parking lot. Steve, you've seen it, you know it is, yeah. And that's where Gordon Arnold actually was, which is much farther to the north than Nigel had him.
Okay.
But I think he is there. We know he's there because Senator Yarborough saw him there.
Yeah, we
And
have
testified
the tape of
about it.
Senator Yarborough saying that he saw the soldier hit the ground and all that.
Right, so we know he was there.
And Senator Yarborough got involved, and that's when I went over to D. Platt, took a picture of Senator Yarborough talking to Penn Jones, and I put that up on the head of my Yahoo group.
You're so cool, man. You really are.
I've been around a while.
Yeah.
See.
It's, I wonder, once W moves here to Dallas, I wonder how safe any of us are going to be.
Oh, well, I've argued that the Bush Library would be a terrorist target.
Yeah,
And-
certainly.
And when I made that comment before the University Park City Council, the Dallas Morning News is there, ran my picture in color on the front page of the local section. Did not quote a single word from me over in the article. I had a district judge come to me and said, well, I wanted to read what you said, but they didn't quote you. So here's your picture.
Welcome to the Dallas Morning
That's
News.
the Dallas Morning Republican conservative.
Newspeak.
Last year, you said they were trying to run a petition there in Highland Park to get Bush not to move there. Remember that?
Well, there have been some.
Progress on that.
There have been some efforts, let's see. Oh, let's see, I guess maybe that was Beth Blankenship that had a petition like that. Yeah, there have been all kinds of maneuvers to try to stop Bush
Yeah.
from having the library there.
Particularly his house.
Well, we heard initially that he was moving into this new house that was under construction across the street from where Dick Cheney lived when he was chairman of Halliburton. He lived on Euclid next to the Highland Park City Hall. There was a real estate agent that
Stranded them
got
there?
the local paper. the
They
Park
stranded
City's
them there in Oak
people,
Cliff?
Published a little article
What a horror
saying that
story.
Bush had purchased that property. But that was never in the deed records of Dallas County. The deed records show it was purchased by a guy who lived another half a block away. And it turns out, best we can tell, Bush is not interested in that one.
Two questions.
Sure.
Did you or Dr. Wett in the 80s, by any chance, try to communicate with the Surgeon General who was CF recruit to see if he'd be, regarding the medical photos, to see maybe if he may be interested or sympathetic?
I don't know about Cyril. I certainly did not.
Okay.
I did not. Every once in a while, someone will come up with a really good idea like that, but it's too late for us to do something about it now. But the problem was that the Kennedy family, through the Kennedy's attorney, controlled all access to those pictures. And the way they got suppressed in the first place is the fact that the government illegally gave those pictures, which didn't belong to anybody particularly, they belonged to all of us because it was Department of the Navy film. They gave them to the Kennedy family, who controlled them and withheld them from public view until the year 2039 or until the death of the last remaining Kennedy child, whichever occurs last. So it's a minimum of 75 years of illegal suppression. When I got a hold of them, I decided that the public had to see them, that the world needed to see them, and I released them. And I was, they tried to prosecute me on it, but the government for doing it, but it was ruled that it was just a journalistic leak, and since they were illegally suppressed in the first place, they didn't want to make a big deal out of it. They didn't want to make a federal case out of it.
So who was after you about that, Arnold?
It's not really very clear. I have a feeling that it had something to do with Blakey.
But was there actually any legal proceeding against you over that?
They never filed legal proceeding because it was ruled it was a journalistic league, but I have a feeling that they were going to try to. I testified for 5 days in front of the Assassination, I'm sorry, the ARC. Yeah, the Assassination Archive. What am I trying to say? My mind, I'm so tired.
The House Subcommittee.
Yeah, the
With the review board?
the review board,
Oh.
the ARRB, yeah,
Record Review Board.
Assassination Records Review Board. And
Are you going to be showing stuff right from the start of the talk?
no, not immediately.
Just lower the lights when you let me.
Okay.
You had some other legal proceedings involving some stuff that was stolen from you, is that correct?
Yeah, Diane Allen, who used to work for me, stole the entire photographic archive on the case. And she was ordered to give it back by the court. She refused to. They sent her to jail for 6 months. But she knew the value of it and would rather go to jail for 6 months than return it. So she never did. Yeah. She still has them.
One final question.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Mike?
go get them.
Yeah, I wish we could. The U.S. Marshals came to her house and searched it. They did such a terrible job. They were sitting at the top of her stairs, we later found out, and they never picked them up. They never even found out where they were.
Yeah, Mr. President,
Yeah.
regarding the Zapruder film versus the Orville Nix film, Mike had brought up a point downstairs about, Mike, why don't you explain it, if you could?
Well, we've debated this back and forth already, but no, there's one very clear difference between the two, and it has to do with Clint Hill getting onto the back of the car. And I forget which is which, but on one of them, you see Clint Hill gets on the trunk and he grabs Jacqueline Kennedy, who's half on there, and kind of puts her back in the seat, and then he straddles across. On the other film, when he gets on the trunk, she already puts herself back in the seat.
Well, the Zapruder film is the correct rendition of it because of the angle it was shot at. You can see that they never touch. But because Nix was taken from the other side of the street and he was standing closer, Clint Hill was standing closer, the angle, how can I try to explain this? You've got Jackie here, you've got Clint here. Now Zapruder is shooting from this side here, so you can see that there's clearly no contact between them. However, Nix is shooting from this way, so he's Nix gets Clint Hill obstructing the view to Jackie. He never does touch her.
In one of them, I looked at this. You can't look at the film going by at regular speed because I've tried to on the Nix. I think it's the Nix film. It's very difficult to tell. But if you look at the stills, it becomes very clear. You can see actually he has her hands on her, and he.
How
puts
dare
her-
he? That's the first lady. No, he never touches her. He doesn't. He appears to, and he would have if she hadn't gone in by
Well,
herself.
that's what I see. I'm not the only one, but that's what
Well-
people see in that.
I've studied that for, I guess, pretty close to 30-odd years now, and as I can see, they never really touch. As a matter of fact, as long as we're waiting, can we turn that on?
We don't have to wait, Bob, we can start right away.
Okay. Well, since the point is made now, and since I got it here, may as
To me,
well.
it's very clear.
And then I'll get into it, because I don't have really very much.
It's in several books.
That would probably be good. It's a telephone.
If everybody had had cell phones in '63, we wouldn't be here.
That's true.
is now turning on to Houston Street, heading for the corner of Elm Street, and the crowds are just beginning to thin out.
You all right? Yeah. Well, that's going into that. Yeah.
will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark. I was on Dennis Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the president as he made his way towards the trademark.
I'm not sure whether the actual frames that we want are actually on here, but we don't really need the sound, but it's all right.
Where's the sound come out of?
Out of the side here. Sorry about that. Hello? Yeah, Eric? Okay, I'll see you then. You too, thanks, bye-bye. It's just funny the heck out of me, isn't it?
Something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by.
This is just going to fight me every inch of the way. Let's try it again.
I could watch that again.
Huh?
I could watch that again.
Okay.
The motorcade is now turning onto Houston Street, heading for the corner of Elm Street, and the crowds are just beginning to thin out.
Again, you got to remember that Nick's is actually behind where the president's car was by a half a block.
Now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark. I was on Dennis Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the president as he made his way towards the trademark.
Mrs. Kennedy, at the time that happens, is sitting about the middle of the car, and Clint Hill is all the way to the left. He never actually touches it. The sound of the gunshots were from the recordings made in Dealey Plaza during the tests for the House Assassinations Committee. The timing goes to the actual tape recording that McLean made, Officer McLean made. We took the actual timing and I superimposed the shots because on the McLean tape, the sound of the motorcycles is just too loud for us to hear the sound. Well, I only dealt with the ones that we could see. There's actually 5 there, but one is 0.7 seconds next to the other, so it sounds like one. Well, you're still hearing the end of one, you're still getting a second one, but they're right on top of each other. There actually are 5, but we only hear 4, which is, I think, what happened in the plaza a lot, too. Well, that's Officer Baker running into the depository. I'm sorry? Oh, no. This is a compilation of probably 25 different films.
see people running up to the grassy knoll?
Yeah, quite a few did. You'll see that in a minute.
You see right now.
Actually, for that, we probably could stand to use the sound. You see? Thank you. There they go.
Is this from that DVD that you had available?
Yeah.
Alongside Elm Street, there by the 7th Freeway, several police officers are rushing up the hill at this time. Stand by. Just a moment, please. Something has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by, please.
I estimate about 400 people ran to the knoll. Initially, only one person ran to the depository. Anyway, that's that. You want to? Sure. The whole thing?
I could see it again.
All right. Hey.
Or at some point you were doing some work on something. Who's been inside the other venues on the 6th floor?
Yeah.
Where you stand on that?
I see it there. I see it in both the Hughes film and the Bronson film.
And the crowds are just beginning to thin out.
Is it possible to let us know whose film each one is?
Muchmore, Nix, Towner. I'm sorry. I think of this for a minute. My mind just went blank. Muchmore again. Hughes.
President's car is now turning
Towner.
onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes
Oh, it's Dorman. The
before
other one was Dorman.
I was on 7th Freeway
This is,
earlier, but the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the president.
I'm sorry?
as he made his way
Something you
towards the
wanted to
police
show us
car.
in the Towner film?
No, it's just I couldn't remember the name for a minute. This is Towner. This is Hughes. Or Bell. This is Bell. Zapruder, of course. Muchmore. Nix. But Zapruder rather, then Nix.
That's a Pascal
I didn't use Pascal because she doesn't show anything.
She was further away.
Yeah, she started filming before. She was filming before and after, but not during. This is Daniel, the Daniel film.
Which audio? Did you compile the audio too?
The audio is something I created after the fact, because the film silent by itself is just so frustrating. So I made the audio. The audio is not from Dilly Plaza.
Something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by.
That voice, what was that voice from?
From the radio, from Dallas radio, from different broadcasts.
You have a picture of Kennedy foot on the door of the car and all that. They had someone live. I think
It's not Kennedy's foot. You mean the one on Stemmons? That's actually Clint Hill's foot.
lying down.
Yeah, lying on the trunk of the car with his foot hanging over the edge.
I thought it was from the inside of the car. Was Kennedy upside down at some point? Or?
He was lying in Jackie's lap, but his foot never came up in the air. It's not like he just flipped. I have other photographs which I've published in my books that show that. As a matter of fact, in the new book, I show several of those pictures where you can take him from slightly above, where you can see his whole leg, not just the foot. And you see the
Spread, it's like spread eagle.
yeah, spread eagled over the car, the trunk.
Did he ride with Parkland on the trunk, or did he get into the back seat?
I'm sorry?
He got up on top of Jackie, didn't he?
No, he never climbed on top of Jackie.
Stayed on the trunk.
He stayed on the trunk the whole way, all the way to the hospital.
It was safer though to hang on that way. I think if we tried to get in, he'd go fall off.
Yeah, that could be too. Besides, it would be kind of inappropriate to jump on top of the First Lady, I guess.
Why are some people walking down the...
Yeah, there were two of them. Just two of them going backwards. Everybody else is going toward the knoll.
Are they involved?
That little old lady's always made me suspicious.
Alongside Elm Street, there by the 7th Freeway.
That's CBS footage.
Rushing up the hill at this time.
That's Bell. The Umbrella Man does appear in some of these, yes. That's that. You're welcome. As long as we're here. Who had the flashlight before? Can I borrow that? Thanks. That way we won't have to turn on the light. Oh, never mind. Thank you. That's all right now. I'm pretty sure I did. I hope I did. 'Cause I don't have it. Double check though.
I got it.
Great. See if I can find this right one here. Okay. All right. I don't think we need that anymore. I don't think.
He wants it on his video.
Oh, do you? Okay, fine. All right. Of course, the time of the assassination, this was taken at the moment just before the fatal headshot, the president, and just an opening frame. It's not for anything in particular. Oh. By the way, this is going to be the cover of the new book, Absolute Proof. This is from the Bronson film, and it's taken at the exact moment of the fatal headshot. We see the explosion right here. There's Abraham Zapruder and Marilyn Sitzman, and there's the Black Dog Man.
What's the Black Dog?
The Black Dog Man is a man who's standing behind the corner of the wall. He's photographed by 7 different photographers. Immediately after the assassination, he ran back into the parking lot, and he's never been identified. This is important as a side point. Somebody mentioned before downstairs about the book Mortal Error, Bonar Menninger and Howard Donohue's book. Well, as you can see here, nobody is standing up with a machine gun or any kind of a gun. That was a fantasy. Both of them, Bonar Menninger and Howard Donohue, both came to my house before the book was ever published. And I showed them the whole film of this, frame by frame, showing that it didn't happen. And they knew it didn't happen, but they published the book anyway. Okay, these are the ones that I can't have photographed. Okay? Okay. These photographs were taken inside the operating room at Parkland when Lee Oswald was still alive. Lee's there on the operating table. As you can see, I was able to pull a lot out of this. When you look at the negatives, you can't see any image at all. It's really, truly remarkable. This is the inside of Lee's chest. Here he's cut open, and these are his innards. There's his face, so we know it's him. This picture was taken right after he died. They've taken the endotracheal tube out of his mouth at this point. This is the first photograph of him in death. There are several of him in life. The book will have, I've taken the Alkins photographs, the entire set, and I've colorized them. So they are now, for the first time, available in color. I have the missing frames of the Zapruder film as well, all the ones that were cut out by Life magazine. They'll all be there too. This is frame 210. This is the frame that the Warren Commission and FBI stated was the frame where the first shot could have been fired because the live oak tree is blocking the view from the window.
Can I turn the camera?
Now you can, yes, you can turn it on now. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is frame 210. Now some of these pictures I've released in the magazine that I sell in Dealey Plaza, but they're much smaller there than they'll be in the book. They'll be much larger in the book. This is another one. This is actually the frame that corresponds to a jiggle analysis that for a shot that occurred before this point. Now, I was talking to one of the Dealey Plaza witnesses about 4 years ago. Her name is Jean Newman. Steve, I think you were there when we were talking. You were there when we were talking to her, and she told me that she saw a bullet hit the street, and told me where she saw it hit. So I went back to the Zapruder film, and I actually studied it through a microscope, frame by frame. This is Phil Willis, and directly in front of him we see the street, and there's absolutely no problem there. Nothing's happened. 1/18 of a second later, at frame 143, the bullet strikes the street right in front of him. Right there. Exactly where Jean Newman told me that the shot would be, where she saw it hit. And she saw the spatter go toward the rear. She said the shot definitely came from the front. Here, in the next frame, 144, the stuff has started to settle, but you can still see the result of the shot. This is something that has always eluded us. We've never seen this before. This is a brand new discovery. There it is, right there. That's where the bullet actually struck. There was a shot, the one that President Kennedy responded to, and he responded to this shot way back in the 150s. Now this is the proof of the second headshot. This is perhaps the most important of the new discoveries in the case, and this is what I've come to offer you guys who were great enough to show up here and come to this conference. You're familiar with the acoustics evidence. Officer McLean, a fraction of a second after this frame of the film was taken, turns around, looks over his shoulder at us, then reaches down with his left hand and he keys the microphone of his motorcycle rather, and starts to record the sounds of the shots onto this dictabelt. That's the actual dictabelt itself. The House Assassinations Committee did acoustics testing right over there in Dealey Plaza. And when I found out they were going to do this, I wrote them a memo, which they did publish. The memo is actually in the volumes published by the House Committee, where I suggested that they fire from every suspected firing point. Professor Blakey, of course, ignored what I had to say. They fired from only two positions. They fired from the 6th floor window, which we see here, and they fired from the grassy knoll. There's the grassy knoll, and the test shot fired from there. Hi. You fell asleep.
Don't let it happen again.
So I just don't want him to miss it, is all. I might want to take away he's a tired guy. He works more than any of us.
You don't have to buy the DVD anymore.
There you go. Okay. when we worked on the, everyone's familiar with the scientists that worked on the acoustics evidence, Jim Barger, Mark Weiss, Ernest Ashkenazi. Well, I was the fourth. But I didn't work with that part of it. I dealt with the visual part of it. We synchronized the Zapruder film to the acoustics tape. They had originally 15 shot impulses with 3 potential shots from the grassy knoll. Through filtration and elimination of the evidence, they actually got rid of many of the shots. And when they were finished, they were left with 5 shots together. Now, there's Mark Weiss and Ernest Ashkenazi. They were testifying before the House committee. And these are the best guys in the world on acoustics evidence. There's no question about it, along with Jim Barger. And here we see some of the waveform showing the results of the shots and the echo patterns. What they were left with, now of course you guys are all familiar with the case. You know that the government now said through the House committee that there were 4 shots. We had 5. This one, which has a greater degree of probability based on the echo patterns and the acoustic fingerprint, had a greater probability than this one. But because it was so close to this one, they arbitrarily removed it. It was there though. Lakey didn't want that many shots. He just wanted 4. This is the fatal headshot right here, the one that came from the grassy knoll. And this is a recreation from JFK. I shot this shot when we were doing the movie. This is supposed to be Gordon Arnold, but he's in way the wrong spot. Gordon was actually around over here. This is the waveform for the fatal shot, the one from the grassy knoll. The actual shot itself is here. This is the muzzle blast at this point here. The actual ultrasonic sound wave is this one, the real big one. That's before the actual sound hit the microphone, the sound of the explosion. Boo, hiss. Anyway, this is Professor Blakey, of course, who didn't want there to be too many shots. This is Dr. Donald Thomas. Dr. Thomas is the only person to ever do a peer review of the actual acoustics evidence. And he increased the probability from 95% or greater to 98% or greater. And he was absolutely right. And this is what he had. This is the timing of the shots. Between the first 2 shots is 1.7 seconds. Of course, it takes 2.3 seconds to fire the rifle twice. Between 1.1 seconds, or let's face it, 1 second apart, you've got 2 more shots. Then you've got a gap of 4.8 seconds between the first volley of shots and the second. This is the shot that killed the president from the grassy knoll, and this is one that followed 0.7 seconds later, less than 3/4 of a second later. These are closer than any of these. This is frame 312 of the Zapruder film, the last frame before the fatal shot. We're all familiar with this, but we'll go through it anyway. This is 313, and of course everybody is familiar with the argument, well, the explosion's in front of the head. No, it's not. This is the front of the explosion, that's the point of entry, and there's the rear of the explosion there. You see how much lighter it is? It went to the rear as well. But because the sun is coming from the right side, as we view it here, the president's head is casting a shadow against that part of the rear of the explosion, so a lot of it is obliterated visually. We can't see it. Notice here that there's still a piece of brain in the air at this point. Now at frame 318, 5 frames after the headshot, Zapruder hears it. The bullet travels faster than the speed of sound. Zapruder didn't hear it. He saw it, but he didn't hear it until now. And when he hears it, he jumps. This is part of the jiggle analysis that Louis Alvarez did back in 1964, and it works. But the reason why he didn't have enough of these, we didn't know it at the time. He was not working from the real film. When you think about it, that's pretty obvious. He was working from the frames that appear in volume 18 of the Warren Commission report and volumes. At 318, we see this terrible jiggle happen because Zapruder hears the sound and it startles him. And the president at frame 321 has now hit the rear, as far back as he's going to go, and then he bounces off the seat and starts to go forward. And he stays forward until this point. Now notice, please. This is the front of the president's head wound, right here. Notice how flat it is? 1/18 of a second later, at 327, there is a second headshot, which occurs right there. And the wound starts to go forward. It grows. Between that frame and this frame, it grows forward. And in the frames, 2 or 3 frames that follow, the immediate frame that follows that explosion, you see the brain coming out here? We have been looking for all these years for an explosion similar to the 313 explosion. The problem is, by the time this happened, all that mass was gone. There's much less brain left. And as this happens, as the bullet strikes the president's head, it forces the brain matter forward and downward and into Mrs. Kennedy's lap. And here, between 327 and 331 and 332, we have an identical jiggle. Zapruder hears this shot, and he starts to go, whoa, bingo. We have it again. We have exactly the same thing that we would see. Now, if you'd like to see it in motion, here it is. By the way, this is 335, the first really clear frame, where we see the skull flap downward and opened from the top of the head up here, and we see how the top has been sheared off completely, and the exit wound, that volcano shape in the back of the president's head. Now here it is in motion. Notice from the first one, where it's totally flat, immediately thereafter it grows, and then the brain starts flying out. This is the second headshot. Cyril Wecht was right. Several of us were right for all these years. There actually is a second headshot. And I'm sorry?
From where the knoll?
The knoll was the first of the 2 headshots. The second one came from behind. Now, there is a point to consider here that is a possibility. As you probably all know, Governor Connolly was aware of being hit in the back immediately. But he was not aware until he woke up in the hospital that he'd been hit in the wrist and the thigh. There is a possibility, although not a probability, but a strong possibility, that at this point, as the bullet goes through the president's head, it enters the back of his head here just above the hairline, exits from that point in the front of the wound and the side of his head. I think that bullet went on and hit Governor Connolly in the right wrist, and that's when he begins to drop the hat from his hand. If there was a magic bullet, a bullet that went through both men, this would have been it in my yes, sir.
Where was the exit on Kennedy?
That right there. The exit is right here. Let me back it up.
On your face, where would it be?
Right here, where the front of that massive
Same
fault.
place where the front shot is.
Pretty much, pretty close to where the front shot went in. Okay, here at 327, 326 again, it's flat, totally flat. But at 327, we have this bright spot right there, which I think is related to this shot. And at that point, that exact point, that's where the wound expands. But it's instantaneous. It happens in an 18th of a second. It would happen probably a lot faster, except the film is shot at 18 frames per second. So we have that happen there. The bullet then, I think, exits through. If we had a pointer, you could see that there's a direct line to Governor Connolly's hands. Now, at this point, Connolly is still holding that Stetson hat in his hand. At this point, it becomes obscured by the rest of his arm and his